reading for this session is creating in the self-image. All these sections that we've been reading seem to me to be profoundly important for understanding A Course in Miracles. I I don't know how anyone could really follow the later sections without having some level of understanding of the sections that we've covered in this chapter and in the next. And so, what we're reading in this session is in many ways linked to the material that appeared in the previous section. So, this is just a way of saying if you were not listen to the video on judgment and the authority problem, I would encourage everyone to take some time to listen to that because it's a kind of a companion piece to what we're reading in this session, and the two together create a more complete picture of the issues with self-concept. One more idea I want to introduce, and that is the idea of a foundation stone. Now, unless you're a builder, this may not be a term that you're accustomed to using, but foundation stones were always used as the very first stone that would be put in place for the foundation of a new building. And that stone, everything would key off of it. The position of the entire building would be based on the location of that foundation stone. And so everything was in reference to this stone. And the reason why this is important will become obvious in our very first paragraph. So hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader for this session is Julie C.
Every system of thought must have a starting point. It begins with either a making or a creating, a difference we have already discussed. Their resemblance lies in their power as foundations. Their difference lies in what rests upon them. Both are cornerstones for systems of belief by which one lives. It is a mistake to believe that a thought system based on lies is weak. Nothing made by a child of God is without power. It is essential to realize this, because otherwise you will be unable to escape from the prison you have made.
Mm-hmm. So we need to put this concept of a cornerstone or a foundation stone in context as it applies to A Course in Miracles. Just as a cornerstone is the first stone that positions the entire building in a structure, so too in a thought system, there is a cornerstone, a central idea from which all the other ideas relate to the central idea. And in the context of A Course in Miracles, there are two thought systems, the egos and the Holy Spirits. And if we are to heal, we must trace back the errors of the ego to where they started, to the beginning, to the cornerstone, the central point, the central lie for which all the other ego lies are based. Okay, so that's the principle. What you may not know or realize is that you've been operating from a thought system your entire life. Let's just talk about the ego for a moment. You've been relying on a thought system your entire life. It has a cornerstone or a center point. And much of this goes on below the levels of your conscious mind in the shadows of your conscious, so you don't fully realize these things. And what we are doing in this session and in others are exposing that thought system of the ego so that you can see its basis, its fundamental premise, and also see that it makes no sense, that it's not worthy of your belief. How so, which moves us on to the second segment of this paragraph, which is given all the confusion around the ego's belief system, still, if it is your thought system or my thought system, that does not mean that it is weak, because the power of our minds to give belief and faith to a set of ideas is strong. It's essential to recognize the power of our mind. Otherwise, you'll be unable to exercise the power of your mind to escape from the ego's prison of judgment. The prison that you have made is the ego's belief that it's up to you to judge what's best in life. And I have one more comment to make that is really a continuation of something that occurred in a previous session when Atisha asked about decisions and whether or not decisions were the same as free will, something along that line. Well, just realize that decisions, as we all know, you can make very good decisions with your mind. You can also make very poor decisions with your mind. So a decision in and of itself is not holy and does not lead you into happiness. The point that the power of decision is my own. It is your God-given ability to make these decisions for yourself. And no matter what you choose, whether or not you choose the ego and guilt, or you choose the Holy Spirit and innocent, it is not without power. The power of decision can be applied either way. And one of the big insights in the Course of Miracles is that we all had this power and we were using it unconsciously based on a thought system that we were not told about. And so we're going to be exposing all that in this session, as well as other sessions. We'll go on.
You cannot resolve the authority problem by depreciating the power of your mind. To do so is to deceive yourself, and this will hurt you because you really understand the strength of the mind. You also realize that you cannot weaken it any more than you can weaken God. The devil is a frightening concept because he seems to be extremely powerful and extremely active. He is perceived as a force in combat with God, battling him for possession of his creations. The devil deceives by lies and builds kingdoms in which everything is in direct opposition to God. Yet he attracts men rather than repels them, and they are willing to sell him their souls in return for gifts of no real worth. This makes absolutely no sense.
Mm-hmm. So let's just make sure we're clear here about the Course of Miracles introducing this concept of devil. Notice that it's in italics. So it doesn't mean the real devil. It means the idea or the word that is used as a devil. And in another place, it makes it clear that this is a concept, a belief in separation. And the belief, which is, as we know, a pervasive belief, the belief in separation is the devil. It's the thing that keeps you in a constant state of enmity with the concept of the creator. It's perceived as being in combat with God, battling him for his creations. This is fundamentally the byproduct of the authority problem. Who's in charge of this reality, of this creation? Is it the creator, or is it your own thought system? One or the other has to be true. If we believe in the separation, then we will build a kingdom in which everything is in direct opposition to God. In other words, we'll cherry pick ideas out of life and assemble them together and just make laws out of them and be guided by them with no reference to the eternal laws of the creator. And then one more here is, I thought, very interesting. Says that people who believe in this idea of being your own creator are willing to sell the devil their souls in return for gifts of no real worth. So this is one in which we sell our entire belief system to the concept of separation, which is in opposition to God. And then we use the power of our mind to reinforce that belief. We give it our faith. And furthermore, then perceive all of this as being beyond our control. Do you see how it captures? This is why they call it the ancient prison. What's outside of my control, there's nothing I can do about it. That's false. It's a belief that we have an allegiance, a permanent allegiance to this thought system. That is false. It's a mistake, but not a permanent allegiance. And it's a belief that, in fact, we are autonomous beings that have no creator other than our own imagination. And that is false in itself. So the ego's thought system is a multi-layered delusional system. And evidence of that is that people will kill each other to defend that belief system. Whole nations will go to war killing each other to defend that thought system. I mean, the evidence, this makes absolutely no sense to follow that in those footsteps. So we want to heal. This is within our control. We have not signed a permanent lease of our souls to the thought system. We simply need to correct our minds regarding such matters. Julie,
We have discussed the fall or separation before, but its meaning must be clearly understood. The separation is a system of thought, real enough in time, though not in eternity. All beliefs are real to the believer. The fruit of only one tree was forbidden in the symbolic garden, but God could not have forbidden it, or it could not have been eaten. If God knows his children, and I assure you that he does, would he have put them in a position where their own destruction was possible?
no.
The forbidden tree was named Tree of Knowledge. Yet God created knowledge and gave it freely to his creations. The symbolism here has been given many interpretations, but you may be sure that any interpretation that sees either God or his creations as capable of destroying their own purpose is in error.
Mhm. So he's using the story of the fall of Adam and Eve from grace in the Garden of Eden, first book of Genesis, and implies that this is a symbolic story. That we're not. The purposes here are not to trace out a historic event. It's to look at a story that has a symbolism whose meaning is shared by three of the world's major religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all share the fall from the Garden of Eden as a symbolic story. Many believe it even to be a literal story. And so this idea of a fall can symbolize what we call the separation. But in order for the story to be useful, its meaning must be clearly understood. That the separation did not occur from eating an apple that Adam was told to leave, not to consume. The separation is a thought system which appears real to our minds in time, but has no meaning in eternity. No one in eternity believes in the separation. But the illusion of the separation looms large now because all beliefs are real to those who believe them. Again, the power of decision is your own. If you give the power of your mind to these ideas, you will believe them and be impacted by that set of beliefs. So, what is then the other meaning here? It's about the symbolism that God, first of all, put a tree there and then forbid Adam and Eve to eat. Well, that's a great temptation. That's like telling your little kids, your grandchildren, there's a jar of cookies in the kitchen, but don't eat any of them. So that's, very deceptive. And then they're putting them in a position where their own destruction was possible. And so it's a type of symbolism that has many interpretations where God's intentions are perhaps unethical, if not immoral. But you may be sure any interpretation that sees God as creations is capable of destroying their own divine plan is in error. So let's summarize again this epic story of the fall of Adam and Eve eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This epic story has had many misunderstandings where God is misrepresented. But the thing that and we'll continue on the next slide as well, the thing you want to take away from here is this event that the story symbolizes represents the separation itself. And it has nothing to do with being naked and feeling ashamed or an apple or a tree. It has to do with your own life. It applies to you and I and everybody else. It has to do with a thought system that looms large in our subconscious mind and therefore continually affects us until we learn to heal.
Eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a symbolic expression for usurping the ability for self-creating. This is the only sense in which God and his creations are not co-creators. The belief that they are is implicit in the self-concept, or the tendency of the self to make an image of itself. Images are perceived, not known. Knowledge cannot deceive, but perception can. You can perceive yourself as self-creating, but you cannot do more than believe it. You cannot make it true. And as I said before, when you finally perceive correctly, you can only be glad that you cannot. Until then, however, the belief that you can is the foundation stone in your thought system, and all your defenses are used to attack ideas that might bring it to light. You still believe you are an image of your own making. Your mind is split with the Holy Spirit on this point, and there is no resolution while you believe the one thing that is literally inconceivable. That is why you cannot create and are filled with fear about what you make.
Mhm. So this may be difficult, certainly upon first reading or even the second or third reading, to grasp what are they getting at here? What's this got to do with me? However, I would like to reassure you this has everything to do with you and the way you view yourself and the way you view everybody else. In fact, it has to do with the purpose of your life. And we were using the fall of the Adam and Eve in the garden as a symbolic story, which represents here, we're told, of where the self believes that you can create your own self-image. Let's say this is really key. This is psychological concept. Everyone has a concept of themselves called a self-image. Everyone does. And where does that come from? Well, it's a self-image. It's the way you see yourself. And how did it come about? Well, truth is, it was cobbled together throughout your early life. You pieced together, and other people had influence on you. And perhaps your family of origin was very strong, or your culture, or whatever educational system you got, and you pieced something together. It by definition, it's unstable and fragmentary. And if you are inclined to believe that it's something more than that, I think I could convince you that in a half hour of time, you can change anyone's self-concept just by telling them how much you dislike them, how you think they're ugly. All you do is hurl a bunch of lies at them, and a person's defensive mechanisms will rise up and they'll start to wonder about these things. Matter of fact, the political environment is often filled with one attacking each other's self-concept. This person's not to be trusted. Their motives are not to be believed. It goes on all the time. I cited in yesterday's session how you can really see it in teenagers who are seeking to piece together a self-concept, often one independent of their family. It's really obvious because they're so new at it, how they do that. Well, the truth is that we're all doing that. It's a belief that somehow you're supposed to do that, that you need to do that, that it's useful for you to think about yourself and how you appear to others. And look what the Course says. Of all the ways in creation in which you can unite with God and co-create with Him, this is the only sense in which you are not co-creators. This is where you're saying, I'm not what God created me to be. I'm what I think myself to be here on earth. Everybody does this and does it all the time. So don't feel particularly guilty about it. It's a error. It's a philosophic error. And remind me before we go on to talk about what the perfect solution is to this error. All right, so it's a tendency to make an image of oneself apart from that which was given to us by the Creator. And all this is what we refer to it in shorthand for the remainder of the course as self-creating. You believe that your image was of your own making. This kind of doubles back on itself. You believe that you formulate and direct and guide what you are. This is the error. It is true that you can decide what you do. It's also true that you can decide what you think and feel. But it's not true that you can remake yourself into something different than what the Creator made you to be. So the error, the lie, is that you can self-create. You can't make that true. And so let's complete the story, because this is very much about each one of us. That belief becomes the foundation stone of the ego's thought system. This is the cornerstone, the centerpiece from which the entire thought system is structured and oriented around. That is, that you're not created by God, but you're created by something here in time and space on earth. And then the ego erects all its psychological and emotional and intellectual defense mechanisms to reinforce that great lie. All your defenses are used to attack ideas that might call this into question. What we're doing right now, calling it into question, all ego defense mechanisms are mobilized to resist ever questioning this idea. Well, that's pretty profound. And by the way, before Course in Miracles, I read over 60 books in psychology. I tried to read all the greats in there, and none of them had the insights that appear right here on this paragraph. David, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Jonica. Yes, the language is so beautiful and so precise. I like looking the definitions up a lot because it gives me a little further insight. And in this first sentence, eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a symbolic expression for usurping the ability for self-creating. I thought the use of the word usurping was interesting. And in Merriam-Webster, that is take or use or seize or hold without right, or exercise or seize wrongfully with wrong authority. I thought that was a good, that you're confusing the author, that you cannot create your self-concept. Thank you.
Very good, David. Confusing the author. That really fits, doesn't it? Especially with what we read in the previous section about the authority problem and the question of authorship. Thank you. Very good. Okay, so now we've identified that there's a cornerstone to the ego's thought system. We've identified how it's formulated with shorthand self-creating, but really it's a belief that we can make an image of ourself that is real. And we also, I pointed out that all these images are actually very fragile and are apt to change and adapt to the situation and circumstances of your life. So they're obviously impermanent, and that the ego mobilizes psychological, intellectual, and emotional defense mechanisms to prevent any questions about this from being penetrating. So what you're doing right now, your ego does not like.
The mind can make the belief in separation very real and very fearful, and this belief is the devil. It is powerful, active, destructive, and clearly in opposition to God, because it literally denies his fatherhood. Look at your life and see what the devil has made. But realize that this making will surely dissolve in the light of truth, because its foundation is a lie. Your creation by God is the only foundation that cannot be shaken, because the light is in it. Your starting point is truth, and you must return to your beginning. Much has been seen since then, but nothing has really happened. Yourself is still in peace, even though your mind is in conflict. You have not yet gone back far enough, and that is why you become so fearful. As you approach the beginning, you feel the fear of the destruction of your thought system upon you as if it were the fear of death. There is no death, but there is a belief in death.
So we could frame this whole matter as there's a problem and there's a solution. We've covered the problem pretty well so far. It's a thought system that literally denies the fatherhood of God. Let's talk now about the course's solution, which actually is not complex at all. It's very simple. It can be explained in just a minute or two. And it has to do with going back to the foundation, the center point of your thought system, which is the foundation that God has given us. Let's see, a couple workbook lessons. My mind is a part of God's. I am very holy. I am as God created me. These would be what was true in the beginning of all creation is still true now and forevermore. That's the beginning. Well, the ego tries to throw dirt on top of all that, trash on top of that, and cover it up from your awareness and create a false foundation of lies and have you never go past the false foundation down to the truth. So what the Course says is you must return to your beginning. That's the original state in which the Creator brought all souls into existence. You've not yet gone back. In order to heal, if your mind is in conflict, and will continue to be until you go back far enough to the beginning. And as you approach the beginning, This is a psychological, spiritual passageway as you start to question all these assumptions the ego has given. Its defense mechanisms will rise up. As you push past them and start to approach the truth of the origin of your being, the old thought system of the ego will be challenged maximally. Do not underestimate the fear that lies in a maximal challenge of the ego's thought system. It's not a reality-based fear, but it's a psychological trembling and emotions that rise up. As you approach the beginning, you'll feel the fear of the destruction of your ego thought system as if it were the fear of your death. Several students have discussed this. It's that this would be in psychological terms similar to an existential crisis. A sense of my whole life was based upon believing, let's say, I'm just going to make up an arbitrary situation. Let's say I decide I'm better than all the other people. I just decided that my tribe, my immediately family are privileged above all else. And my whole life centered around that. That's just one of many illusions. And then all of a sudden, for all that to be questioned and seen as a set of lies, a big lie, an illusion, causes the structure of meanings that I had previously built around that ego superiority to collapse. And when it collapses, it feels like a type of death. It's a fear of death. It's not physical, but it can feel like there's nothing left. Many times in hospice work and work with the death and dying, let's say a couple have been married for 40 years. They spent their whole life, every day they went for, they were together. And all of a sudden, he or she is gone. And that life that they had built is not there anymore. And so it results in a collapse of meaning, which leaves one feeling a void, an emptiness. This is why it's very fearful. And even in the case of hospice and death and dying, it can take months, seasons, and years before one emerges back into a sense of what's meaningful to me in life. Well, this is why it's fearful. But with a Holy Spirit, there's an answer waiting that more than replaces the void that the ego was trying to fill before. There's this is where there's so much hope and so much promise, is that there's this great and precious promise that's available, and it needs you to no longer be invested in your past self-image. The only way you can grasp upon fully the Holy Spirit's reinterpretation of your being is to let go of the false self-image and grab hold of the new one. And we have all kinds of ways of illustrating people that try to hold on to both at the same time. Trust me, that doesn't work. You've got to let go of the old self-image and hold on the new one. And so that requires that one have enough confidence in the guidance of the Holy Spirit to enter into this passageway, we said, as you approach the beginning of the truth of your original state, you will feel the fear of the destruction of the ego's thoughts and all the years of investment you've had in thinking that's what was true about you, as if it were the fear of death. It's a belief in a fear of death, and very strong feelings can come up about it out of this experience. And no one would want to undergo this without the guidance of the Holy Spirit to lead you to shine a light like a lighthouse. And, you know, the ship in a storm looks for the light of the lighthouse to guide it home. The Holy Spirit is like that lighthouse in a storm to guide you home.
The branch that bears no fruit will be cut off and will wither away. Be glad. The light will shine from the true foundation of life, and your own thought system will stand corrected. It cannot stand otherwise. You who fear salvation are choosing death. Life and death, light and darkness, knowledge and perception are irreconcilable. To believe that they can be reconciled is to believe that God and His Son cannot. Only the oneness of knowledge is free of conflict. Your kingdom is not of this world, because it was given you from beyond this world. Only in this world is the idea of an authority problem meaningful. The world is not left by death, but by truth. And truth can be known by all those for whom the kingdom was created and for whom it waits.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there's symbolism here. The branch, it bears no fruit, or cut off, wither away. What are we talking about? What's this got to do with what we're, this very personal experience of believing in a thought system that is upside down and insane? Well, the branch, they're switching metaphors here. The branch that bears no fruit is a thought system that leads only to pain and suffering. The ego's thought system. They refer to it also here as your own thought system will stand corrected. It cannot stand any other way. The thought system of the ego cannot last. It is weak, error-filled, upside down. There's not any truth to it whatsoever that you could rebel against the creator and make yourself. So it cannot possibly survive. And so what will be true, so be glad that old thought system will be cut off and wither away. Be glad, because it's just like when you prune a branch, it allows for new growth. The light will shine forth from the true foundation of life. And I have an interpretation here, which you can accept or not. I'm really taking my liberty on interpreting here. You can either get rid of the ego's thought system while you're walking around in the body here on earth, which is what A Course in Miracles is encouraging you to do, or you can pass from this world and wake up on the next and find that it didn't transfer over into the next world. So my interpretation, we encourage you, why wait? Why suffer longer when the keys are given to us to unlock this ancient prison of judgment and suffering now, why wait? So it is, the Course describes this as a choice between life and death. And our mind would immediately think of physical death or physical life. Set that thought aside for a minute. Think of a life, a biological life that's not worth living, a life where you wish you were dead, or you have no reason, no meaning, no purpose. Is that a life with a capital L? Or is that just biological existence? Our world has so much struggle. I'm probably getting off the track here, but this is like keeping people on a life support system for a year. They can't eat or feed or breathe. There's not very little brain activity. We're trying to keep them alive. I'm not really trying to make a comment on all that. I'm just pointing out that life consists more of something more than just having a heartbeat. And so the Course says that this choice that we face between how we view ourselves is one that is a fork in the road. Do you choose to view yourself as autonomous, independent of the creator, of being your own creator? That's a path to believing in hopelessness and fear and despair. Or do you choose a path of life itself, to light and life, a life that is based upon the true foundation of life? The power of decision is your own. It lies in your hands to choose, and whichever choice you make, you will believe that that is your reality. Okay. Is that it? That's it. That's it for this session. That's it for this chapter. Let me invite you to join us for the next chapter, which everything that we just said is a foundation for a whole litany of beliefs that the ego, that are widely popular in this world. They're a common narrative, a set of illusions that people attempt to live their life by. We'll explore each of, not every, but many of those illusions in the next chapter. I hope that you'll join us. Let me say one more thing that I intended to say earlier that got away from me. Is later on, this theme that we've discussed here about a false self system becoming the basis for the ego's thought system versus your true self system. This theme is traced throughout the rest of the Course in Miracles. It's introduced very powerfully here, but it's not going to go away because it is the cornerstone of the entire thought system. Well, one of the things that we learn in later chapters is, and just bear with me, I know this might come as a surprise, is that it's not up to you to judge yourself. It's not up to you to formulate an image of yourself. To attempt to is to use judgment against it's weaponize it. It uses an opinion, a judgment against you. That is not our function. So put that over as ego activity. Everybody does it. And now we're being told that that is a fundamental error. Now, on the other side of what this course teaches, the Holy Spirit has already judged you. The Holy Spirit has an image of you that is perfectly clear, is true for all time, and is unquestioned. She has a ready-made gift for each one of us. It's different from the self-concept that we made up, but it's the finest replacement. It's a whole and complete concept that is more than enough to make one feel good about oneself. It goes so far as to say that you are a holy being of God. I mean, it's a glorious self-concept. And so the big point here, the simple version is we're going to be asked to exchange the self-concept that we made, to lay that down and open our hearts and our minds to receiving from the Holy Spirit the self-concept that she has for us. And that will more than heal the mind. That will also put everything will be righted in the mind when we fully accept the Holy Spirit's teachings about the nature of our being. When we fully accept that, all the other errors that the ego had will fall away as meaningless, because they are meaningless, and we'll be full of hope and light and happiness. Noelle, you had your hand up.
In this regard, I remember what Kim said yesterday about the self-image. She said she was so grateful that she doesn't have to provide or fashion or create her own self-image. She said it was such a relief to hear that. And that's another way of looking at it, to loosen the iron chains of our own self-image, self-made.
Yeah. Yeah. We read yesterday, you have no idea the burden that we carry around. Maintaining a false lie about yourself is a lot of work. It requires it's a lot of, some people really, they believe that it's real, but it's still, it's fragile. And to try to maintain it requires tremendous mental and emotional investment. And to be free of that, to not have to do any of that, really lightens your load. Talk about tranquility and peace. Not to have to pretend in a lie is really to be transparent and authentic and honest. And so this is really means that it's easier for us to access that inner peace and maintain a state of peace, because we're not working so hard to maintain a facade. So thank you for your, this is very deep psychology here. I know, because I've read many of the psychological works. This is profound as anything I've read anywhere. It's a gift. This was just a few paragraphs we read this session, and the whole summary of the human dilemma is kind of encapsulated right here, along with the answers. And so that's the theory. There's still practice to do. There's still application on everyone's part in order to unravel our investment. It's like financially, we would call it a divesting ourselves of our false investment in the ego and reinvesting in the Holy Spirit's guidance. So that doesn't happen instantaneously for most people. It's a process, but you now have a vision of where it goes and what it offers. And once you've decided, this is what the course teaches, once you've decided that you want that goal for yourself, then teaching you the means of getting there is easy. The hard part, or the most important part, is deciding above all else, I want to see things differently. So thank you all for your attention. Julie, thank you for your reading. We'll pick this up with chapter 4 next Saturday. Wanted to welcome Jennifer back again and say thank you all. It's an honor to be on this journey along with you. Namaste.
Thank you, Yannicka, everyone.
Jonica. Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you,
You're
Jennifer.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Good night.
Everyone.
Good
Peace
night.
and love.
Bye.